hope o ka aina Iki mai ka elele o ka loko ino Pala pala anunu me ka paka
Aloha ahi ahi kākou e Hawaii. This is Pokalai Nui and you are listening to Hawaiian Potpourri. On radio station KWAI 1080 on your AM dial. We are broadcasting from the top of the Chinese Cultural Plaza here in Honolulu, Hawaii. Welcome to the program. This evening we'll start out with some discussion about this guy named Bales, is it? The guy who killed 16 Afghans, Robert Bales. And there's this misinformation going around that there had been an agreement between the U.S. military and the Afghans that any violation of or any criminal act committed in Afghanistan by American troops would be tried by American military courts. And we'll talk a little bit about that. I'm ready to just jump right into the subject. I also got a letter from a listener, and he talks about Ron Paul and the 10 principles of a free society. So we'll review some of that. And we'll talk about those local issues of potholes here in Hawaii and what are the implications with regards to rail. Should we be spending our money just fixing potholes, or should we let the potholes run wild and instead pay attention to rail? And we will be inviting your telephone calls. First, I want to make some comments about some of the events of the day and the week, and I will invite your telephone calls in. If you are already on the line, just hold your horses or your brakes, and I'll get to you right after these initial comments, which won't take too long because I recognize that we do have a caller on the line. The first is with regards to Mr. Bales, and I get this from the Star Advertiser paper today, and it talks about the suspect in the Afghan shooting arrives at U.S. prison. First of all, it's more than an Afghan shooting. It's American massacre of 16 Afghan civilians. So it's far more than just a shooting. The method of massacring was at least shooting. There may have been stabbing and other things done to the body. And he arrives at a U.S. prison, and that is to underline the statement that he would be tried by an American court. There's some national reports going around that this is pursuant to an agreement between the U.S. Military and the Afghan government. There is no such thing as a U.S. agreement between the military and the Afghan government. When the United States went into Afghanistan and pushed itself in, it forced itself into Afghanistan, and any agreements made would be not an across the board with what do these lawyers call it? Quid pro quo. It wasn't an equal discussion between themselves. It was instead demand an occupying force saying these are the terms upon which we occupy. And it's the same as Iraq as regards Afghanistan, that any crimes committed by the Americans, soldiers or not, so that when you have these civilian contractors coming in and killing all of these people, as many people as they wanted to, they were tried, in fact, by American courts. But this is not pursuant to an agreement. This is pursuant to the conditions and demands as set down by the American forces. What is the international law with regards to these kinds of agreements? Are they beyond the law? Are they only to be regarded by American law, American jurisprudence, and the rest? Well, international law has a different standard. So that, for example, the people of Germany or the soldiers, the German soldiers during the Second World War would like to use and have used that defense, that they were simply following the appropriate commands or the laws of that country at that time. The Nuremberg Principle set all of that aside and said that there are certain human rights or humanitarian laws that supersede your national claims. And so they would not have or allow that stupidity to occur. Here you have the Americans claiming that any action taken by their soldiers or by their civilians are beyond the law of Afghanistan. On one hand, they claim that we are trying to create an orderly society in Afghanistan. We are trying to give the people or the government ability to govern, to maintain themselves, to protect the integrity of their political structure. And on the other hand, they're saying, but when the big white brother comes across to Afghanistan, we have the right to do whatever we want, and you have no right to try us. Well, let me tell you, my friends, that the international community, over a period of time, have developed different laws. And while they were not able to enforce these principles during the heyday of the Nazis and the beginning of the Second World War, eventually it crept up and it kept up, and they were pursued. So that Simon Wiesenthal, even after the war, created his own entity and worked with governments and went out and pursued these individuals. So when George Bush or even Barack Obama claim that the actions that they are taking as commanders-in-chief of the national government somehow is supposed to exempt them from these kinds of laws, well, you better guess again. You better guess again. And not only are they not exempt, but all of the U.S. military and all of the civilian employees are not and should not be exempt from any commission of crimes committed in Afghanistan. You go to a foreign place, you obey the foreign laws, and you respect the traditions and cultures of that place. There was a book that was written back in the 1960s. It was written by a man named Lederer. I forget his first name. He used to own a bar on Hotel Street. And now I forgot the name of the bar. But the book was called The Ugly Americans. And why was that? It was simply because of that attitude of superiority, that attitude that they can do anything and they can grab anything they want by force. And so hypocrisy was not a word that could be applied to the Americans because they were above all of the principles and the laws that they said everyone else should follow. Well, times are changing. And as we watch these changing times, we are seeing the crumbling of this American empire. And after the American empire has crumbled, what we will see is in actuality a better United States of America. Because at that point in time, the people of the United States of America will realize and will be participating in rejoining the human race like everyone else and becoming true participants on an equal level with everyone else. And so when I say I am awaiting, and I am awaiting very hopefully, not only awaiting, I am seeing it happening. You can see it happen right at the present time. The crash of the American empire. Welcome it with joy. Welcome it with joy, because at that point, as we deal with that very large sector of the human population, we can deal on a basis of equality, of equity, of fairness, etc., etc., etc. All right, so that was comment number one. Now, we do have comment number two. I was going to talk about the potholes in Honolulu, but every time you drive on these streets, you will come to the recognition of potholes. At this point, I'm not going to dwell too much into that. And the third is a gathering that I attended in Waianae this past week with some of the public officials, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. Calvin Say was the sort of the big star. After all, he is the Speaker of the House, and there were a lot of House members who joined and essentially supported Joe Jordan, who is a representative out in Waianae. But we'll talk about what kind of discussions, a level of discussions, and where the discussions are taking us as we engage in events occurring at the legislature. But before we get into that, I know we do have a caller waiting, and he's been waiting patiently, I hope. But I've turned him off so I can't hear him. I haven't answered his phone yet. But let's take that caller. The telephone number here is 524-1080. Aloha, brother. Are you still there?
Aloha.
Yes, aloha.
Counselor Poka.
Welcome to the program. Thanks for waiting.
Poka, thank you. Mahalo. Poka, I love the way you went through that whole thing with that scenario in Afghanistan with that soldier that snapped.
Yeah.
And, I'm a Marine from the Vietnam era. And I didn't, of course, I know better than to, you said it best, and I won't comment. I appreciate you just letting me say a few words about that. Having been picked, since I know how intelligent I am, on 3 different jury trials, picked for jury duty, what I believe is that we will wait to see this particular soldier will be tried, and he will have his day in court. And it's just unfortunate how bad he really did freak out. It seems to be, right? Allegedly.
Yes.
Yeah, but that's pretty weird to say allegedly when he walks back in camp and says, "Yeah, I killed the ball."
That's right. It's an interesting view of the American judicial system, which I am a part of, making the presumption that people are presumed innocent and they are entitled to a fair trial. My question then becomes, where is the equity in this so-called justice system where the trial can be removed to another part of the world, so that the sufferers, the victims, which includes not only the people who were killed, but the whole society, the community, the families, do not have any participation or any part to play when the Americans simply sort of airlift them out of territory and does this. So it causes us to question this high and mighty American judicial system and simply ask these questions. Where is the collective interest with regards to his guilt or his innocence?
Okay, undoubtedly, it's pretty hard to disagree with that.
Yeah.
Are those agreements that were made beforehand that in the event, but geez, that's curious too, isn't it? I mean, a lot of stuff they try to, I don't know, Poca, yeah, that is really questionable. And even Karzai's, flipping out, but of course, Poca, Karzai has to cover his ass because then he becomes a target of his own people, right?
Yes.
And if he doesn't protest and if he doesn't yell loud enough at the injustice of that whole scenario, I mean, good luck to him staying alive.
Yes. Whether he likes it or not, and I think he likes it, he is, in fact, the voice of the Afghan society as recognized by the Americans. And so he undertakes that responsibility. And I think it's appropriate for him to raise that protest. On the other hand, if you look at what Obama is saying, and if you look at the Republican politicians, they are also, as well as Obama, creatures of a political system that they are stuck within. And so it's interesting to see the cross-cultural politics and cross-political politics involved in all of this. Oftentimes the question then becomes, then what rules do we follow? And I would suggest that it's not something new that we need to create or recreate, but they were already created, and that's called international law. Where international law then steps in and says, well, these are the laws that had been agreed upon beforehand, rather than being carried away with nationalism and the passions of the day, then let's see what should apply at that time. And I'm saying that the Americans have avoided these principles of international law, which Americans were so central in formulating at least one period of time in the past.
Look, in the way you so well described that, anybody with half a brain would, think it through and have to realize that I think a lot of Americans are thinking just what you said, Poku, like I did. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I started thinking the same thing. What the heck is going on? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. How can they rush this particular soldier right out of the and then look at how in the media, oh my God, they just you couldn't know his name and nothing about him. Mm-hmm. Of course, that only lasts so long in the real world, right?
Right.
Yeah. But back to international law, look, you're absolutely right. I mean, if this isn't a case for getting back to that, then what, right? Mm-hmm. What are we supposed to just go on?
Yeah.
Who's running for election, for re-election, politicians on our side of the world fighting these kind of wars? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And then some guy snaps and freaks out, and then, well, don't worry about it. We'll take care of him.
Yeah, yeah.
That kind of thing. I mean, that is probably too horribly simplistic, Poka, but I really do appreciate you thinking this through, because since it happened, mm-hmm. I really didn't want to go on the air and talk about this with you, but I'm glad we are. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So sometimes there are things that are so painful that you don't want to examine it. It's like a sore that I was just speaking with a good friend of mine who is in such bad physical condition. He thinks he's dying, and he says, "But I don't like to go to the doctor." I says, "Stop it already. Go see the doctor. You need to examine the problems in order to overcome it. Otherwise, you just let it sit and fester, and it's just making you sicker and sicker, and it's driving you to your own death." And it's the same like these very painful questions. What is the justice of our underlying principles of, and right to a trial by everyone? And a lot of this, previously I talked about this domination, individualism, and exclusion. And here you can see the DIE, deep culture, in operation, in total operation. And in this particular case, when they focus on the individual and the individual's rights, which is very important within the American jurisprudence, but it leaves out the Ola side, the side of the group, the side of the larger society and the pain and all that stuff. So it becomes very obvious when you look at the Afghan society, that particular community, and this particular case. But let's take another example of an individual who has been drinking, and after work he gets together with a group, he drinks, and then he decides, now I'm going home. He's drunk, he's driving down one of our freeways, and then he crosses the line. And this is a very specific case that I represented in my earlier days in the legal practice. Crosses over the line and smashes into a car and kills a woman, and I think there may have been one or another passenger in the car. The woman is a mother of a large family that we have in Waianae. So during the trial, what is being addressed? His guilt or his innocence? Well, it's clear he's guilty, but that's not what the real need in the society is. The need is, how do we heal this particular trauma that has shaken both families and shaken that community itself. The courts say absolutely nothing about it. It's only looking at this individual and how many years of sentencing he will have, or how long we're going to keep him in prison because he was drunk and driving. They don't even look at who gave him the beer and all the advertising by these beer companies about it's the in thing to do, it's okay to do it, and we sell more cars that way, and so drink up, my friends. And then they put a hula girl or some sexual symbol next to this advertising. The society itself is crazy. I asked the court, why don't we pull some of these alcohol companies into the court and ask them what is their responsibility? And the judge, of course, can only say, I'm limited to the rules and the structures around me. The whole system stinks. It protects these major corporations. It elevates the individual without the appropriate concern for the larger society. And so we need to ask ourselves whether or not these principles that we hold so highly should be questioned, should be reviewed, and maybe changed.
Okay, in the sense, back to this particular soldier, which, I mean, I'm sure that everyone in America is absolutely horrified by this particular soldier, snapped and walking out of base with a loaded weapon and going in house to house to kill that many innocent women, children, etc., then turns around when he's done, and then he goes back on base and then just turns himself in. Yep, I just did what I did, and you're going to find out about it. But then, that interim, Polka, where, crap, you can see how the authorities, as it was being played, they didn't know what the hell to do with him, so they had to come up with an explanation. Well, we didn't have a place to keep him, to detain him, which myself as a citizen and a Marine, I'm going, what the hell are you talking about? And then, before you know it, it's, under the cover of darkness, they fly him out of Afghanistan to Leavenworth, or so the media reports, right? And then Karzai comes out. Then, of course, there's all the surviving members of the families that
I think
slaughtered. He literally slaughtered, Polka. And now our government whisks him out of the country of the conflict. And then how the hell are the surviving family members and the rest of the Afghan population, what the hell are they supposed to think?
Yeah.
I mean, why in the world? I mean, he should. I guess I hope you can help us explain this, Polka, because I don't understand it. He's in country, representing our country, and what was the deal? I don't get it. Was it for what, to protect him? Boy, that seems sort of obvious, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Would that create another riot after the Koran burning, which ended up killing all kinds of innocent people?
Yeah.
Oh, God.
Well, thank you for sharing your concerns, your frustration.
And all I wanted to do was call up and ask you about how this city is trying to build this stupid, what rail system, and go ahead and build $250,000 pillars.
I'll tell you what, we'll cover that later. I think you instigated some other callers.
Oh, that's good. Okay.
Before we go to that, we'll get into some music.
Kaulana na pua o Hawaii Kupa ama hope o ka aina Iki mai ka elele o ka loko pala anunu me ka paka Pane mai Hawaii moku o ke ave Koku ana honoa o Pilani Ka ko'o mai kaua i o mano Pa'aku me ke oni o ka kuhi hewa Aolea e kau i ka pulima Maluna o ka pepa o ka enemi Po o hui ai nā ku ai hewa I ka pono sivila a o ke kanaka Aole makoa e mina mina I ka pu'u kala o ke au puni Ua lava mako i ka pohaku I ka ai ka mai